Are you tired of putting yourself last? Of taking care of everybody else's needs and powering through to meet the next set of impossible standards? In our fast-paced society, we lose touch with our intrinsic worth, with the ability to value ourselves for who we are right now. Instead of living life exhausted, frustrated, and disconnected from your authentic self, maybe it's time to put yourself back in the life you've worked so hard to create. Join radio host and life choreographer Laura Cheadle and learn how to build your dreams and live your sparkle using the 5 steps of flaunt. Find your fetish, laugh out loud, accept unconditionally, navigate the negative, and trust in your truth.
Welcome to Flaunt, Build Your Dreams and Live Your Sparkle. I'm Laura Cheadle, and today we are going to talk about the intersection between joy and our own personal happiness, satisfaction, and fulfillment with success, and how living our sparkle and living our best life not only makes us feel good and happy, but it enriches our relationships, both personally as well as professionally. And in talking about that, we are going to bring on Dr. Keis. He is an author, speaker, podcast host, and coach. Now, he has got such a wealth of experience and knowledge and information. I personally feel like this show could last 6 hours. But hey, in the interest of time today, we will keep it at our usual hour. And hopefully you will be as intrigued with his work as I am. And you will seek him out, go to his website, read some of his books, and learn more about his work. Now, he is the foremost global authority on behavioral assessment strategies and processes, an expert in leadership, purpose, and wellness. And what I like about that is many people don't integrate that wellness and that purpose piece into leadership. But oh boy, it's my belief we truly cannot be effective leaders without having our own personal, individual purpose and without wellness. He has authored over 4 million words of content, including 500 articles, 4 books, and a dozen assessments. So with that, welcome to my show.
Oh, wow. With that introduction, I'm just going to look around the room and say, who's that?
Well, I would love for you to just start right off and tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do and how specifically you kind of began to marry the concepts of leadership and wellness, personal growth, professional growth.
Well, let me answer the last one first. So when we think about it, one of our value system is to make sure that we develop holistically. So it's not any single item. All of these items together are important, and on their own they're important, but really we want to look at a holistic model. So that has always been the philosophy of CRG, which is the company that I own, which happens to be, by the way, our 40th anniversary this month. And I've been in the industry 30 years this month. So we've been here for a little while. And if I scroll back, everybody says, well, Ken, you must obviously grew up in a family that was into this. No, I grew up on a dairy farm. Actually, I was a dairy farmer. So this is hardly even close to that at this point. But I went on this journey. I always knew, even when I was younger, Laura, that I was to be a communicator and an encourager of others. However, my grade 9 English teacher told me that I would never amount to anything because I couldn't read or write. So when I did my master's degree, they discovered I was dyslexic. So if we go back far enough, that really wasn't talked about, learning disabilities or some of those things that came into play. And that's why verbally I always seemed to be strong, is because I didn't read or write. Now, to think when I was 16, 17, or 18 that I would become an author and an author of all that content, not even, I couldn't fathom that. I couldn't fathom. So those of you that are listening, my encouragement is that, life sometimes goes in different directions. And once you sort of get rid of some of the chains, if you want to call it that, or the burdens or oppression from other people's opinions, whatever description you want to use, and then you can be free of that. So my journey was, as I went and I left the dairy farm with my dad, And then I started to get into agricultural field, which is my expertise, which that's really where my health and wellness comes from, because I have a diploma in nutrition and genetics from my agricultural college days. And as a nutritionist for dairy cattle, we always looked at the diet. We always looked at the environment for performance. Well, why don't we do that as humans? We actually probably feed our pets, our dogs and cats, better than we feed ourselves, right? And how we treat ourselves. You wouldn't take the number one racehorse in the world, have it stay up all night, eating Smarties, watching TV and on its phone before it's going to be in the Kentucky Derby, would you? But we try to do that as human beings, and we can't figure out why we can't function. So don't get me going on that. And then from there, my journey went into sales, and I was the number one sales performer of an agriculture company, and then moved into sales training, which was back in the late 80s when I started in this profession, and then ran across and came in contact with Dr. Terry Anderson, who founded CRG, who was the original author of the Personal Style Indicator and, the style stuff that you are familiar with, and my book, March More Like Me, which I've recently authored. And so then we progressed over the years of moving more and more into this development of leadership, taking the wellness and health side of things. And then my purpose in life, in 1989, I hired a coach. So we talked about, listeners, how do I go to the next level? A lot of times it's really getting in contact with people like you to serve them as a coach, as somebody to support them. I hired a coach in 1989 when it wasn't even a big deal. I mean, people weren't into that. And I worked for 6 months with Mike, and he helped me to get clear about what my purpose is. So my purpose in life is to help others to live, lead, and work on purpose. So to help you to realize your potential, because in that space, as part of your introduction, is that our highest level of fulfillment, our highest level of meaning, our highest level of joy, if you want to call it that, comes from living in, operating in our purpose, operating in our personal style, understanding what that means, and how can I play to my strengths and not have to worry about my weaknesses as much. I'll clarify that later. And then it's just been a journey over all these years. There's this invention that came up sometimes in the 90s called a computer. Oh, that's what it was. Bill Gates said that nobody's going to need a computer at their desk. Hello, there's Bill. I think he's a bit of a billionaire now because we all have one. Is that all of a sudden the computer showed me the program Word that had all these words misspelled. So now my writing really is through my fingertips. And because there's all these red lines underneath it, then I started to develop my writing. And when I did my master's degree, it was mostly paper-based. So projects, I would go to school 1 weekend a month, and I'd have to write like a 40-page paper on every class for a couple of years. Well, it helped me to refine my writing. Some days I hated it. And then all of a sudden I said, well, what's my voice? And I started to write about those things that were most passionate about me. And that's the rest is history.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. There's a couple of things that I wanted to tag on and talk about a little bit more. You mentioned that this is a journey and that it took you a while to find your purpose and that you actually utilized a coach to help you do that. And I just wanted to point out for the listeners, I was a corporate attorney for 10 years before I found my voice and found my purpose. I went through a lot of things. You were in the agricultural, the dairy farm before you transitioned to find your voice. I think it's important to point out to listeners who might be thinking, I don't know it. I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know it. I don't know. That it is a journey and it is a process. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how they might go about finding their passion, finding their purpose, doing what you and I have done and being happy.
Well, for sure. Thank you for that question. And by the way, and I was just clarifying with you, I have a gift for everybody, which is we'll talk about at the end of the show so that you can stay with us, where you're going to be able to get a copy of my latest purpose book. So when we think about purpose, I think you make a really good point around, usually the question is, it's just too big. What's your purpose, Ken? And so we want to break it down. So first of all, don't get anxious about it. Okay, if I don't know it, then here's what your purpose is. Your purpose is to find your purpose. And so that becomes my job. That becomes my responsibility. In discovery is reserved for the person seeking, the person looking. So I remember having lunch with Dr. Richard Bowles, who wrote the book, What Color's Your Parachute? He's now just recently passed away at 91, I think just a year or so ago, when we're recording this. You could be listening to this podcast in 2050. So anyways, and you are for sure, everybody's listening to your shows over and over again, are they not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
So the point being, I asked him the question, he was in career development for 50 years. I said, why with all the assessments, all the tools, are there so many people who are unclear about their purpose? And he responded immediately with this comment, is that people have not been willing to do the work. You know what? To discover your purpose takes effort. Just showing up and going to work and coming back home and watching TV and not working on yourself is not going to uncover that. Elite athletes, you think about the Super Bowl, if you think about baseball, you think about hockey or whatever, they didn't just show up at the arena and all of a sudden start operating. They practiced, they worked hard, in many cases hours and hours a day to excel. Guess what? It's not that our life is a burden or this is even work, but I need to do the work. I need to do the discovery. So I invested with this coach. I hand wrote about 80 pages of narrative. So part of our process for finding our passion is our life leaves clues. And I break it down in the book to say, let's start paying attention to what I call segments. So what I mean segments, what are the senses and the smells in the environments that really excite you? We get people to not pay attention what's negative. We get them anything that's neutral, forget that. Where is it that your energy is just high? That I don't believe in the concept of motivation. I believe in inspiration. So if we're inspired, what it does is it compels me, it draws me, it brings me in. If some of you listening love the game of golf, and I say, we have a beautiful weather outside and we have a foursome ready, and would you like to join us as far as part of this the golf game? You don't even have to think about it. All of a sudden, like, you're there. You snap, you're there. So not that life's always that, but can we have the majority of it that way? Example, we're on this podcast together. This is not work, is it for you?
No, it's fun.
It's enjoyable. And so for those of us that are in the zone, and here's the sad stats. It's about 10% of the population who actually are living their life on purpose. When Gallup did the study a few years ago about what percentage of the global workforce is disengaged or don't like work at some level, it's 87%. So that is a sad state of affairs. And by the way, everybody that's listening, this is not about being self-centered. This is really about being self-honoring. So if I'm self-honoring, that's when I bring my highest self, my best self, my self that can engage and serve others. Now, first of all, I really want to caution people not to freak out that if I don't know my purpose, as you said earlier, first of all, don't get stressed about that. Just make a decision that you're going to go on this journey of starting to uncover. Now, who I am now versus 30 years ago, I'm a different person. Even though 30 years ago I had clarified that I was to help others to find their purpose, it has evolved. It has grown. Guess what? Podcasts didn't exist 20 years ago. In fact, when I got in this industry, email didn't even exist. Yes, I'm still young, but the reality is how I'm doing what I'm doing has changed, evolved, and moved differently. We just launched our first e-course. Well, that was something that didn't even exist a few years ago as well. So this whole online, just-in-time, consume, amazing content such as you're aggregating online for people, that wasn't there. So there's really no excuse. So my encouragement as you go through, so what are some senses? Where are some people? What is learning where you do the learning and you read about it and you love it? And I'm not talking about like gossip from National Enquirer. I'm talking about things that really, as far as development. The world's changing from an economy point of view. There's no such thing really as careers. There's really expertise. So what's the expertise you bring, and what do you bring to the world to be able to have a gift, to develop, to serve, to help others that you are passionate about? Now, I do want to caution one thing. This is a real debate in our space. Passion on its own is not going to fulfill all purposes. There might be some skills you need to develop. I've had to develop technology skills to be able to do this passion of speaking and encouraging others or doing leadership. I mean, that always hasn't been something that's been enjoyable. Or there could be other skills and competencies such as what we teach around emotional intelligence. You could be in a passionate role doing what you like, but being a jerk or an individual who